Hey there, and welcome back to Bedtime Shadow Story. I know many of you enjoy these stories as a way to unwind and drift off to sleep. So before you close your eyes, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from around the world. Drop a comment and let me know. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more soothing tales. Now, let's dive into part 1 of tonight's story. It was late at night, and the wind howled through the trees, sending a cold chill through the small village nestled at the edge of a dense forest. The streets were empty, save for the occasional cat darting between shadows, and the houses stood, silently, their windows glowing with the warmth of firelight. But deep in the woods there was something far darker at play, something that had been waiting for years, biding its time. The legend had always been there, a whisper passed down from generation to generation, a warning wrapped in the guise of a bedtime story. Never venture into the forest after the sun sets, they would say. The woods are alive with things you cannot see, creatures that crawl and whisper in the dark. Of course, most of the children in the village dismissed it. They had grown up hearing tales of things that went bump in the night, but they never took them seriously. After all, they had seen the forests many times during the day, filled with nothing more than the sound of birds and the rustling of leaves. But as the years passed, the fear started to fade, and the children grew bolder. One such child was Lily, a girl of 12 with bright eyes and a heart full of curiosity. She had always been drawn to the forest, fascinated by the ancient trees that towered over the village like silent sentinels. Despite the warnings, she couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond the tree line. What secrets did the forest hold? What creatures lurked in its shadows? One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Lily found herself standing at the edge of the forest. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of excitement and fear. She had heard the stories, of course, but she had also heard the voices of the older children laughing at them. They had been into the woods many times, and nothing bad had ever happened to them. With a deep breath, Lily stepped forward, the damp earth beneath her feet squelching with each step. The trees loomed tall above her, their twisted branches creaking. In the breeze, the further she went, the darker it became, as if the forest itself was swallowing her up. The familiar sounds of the village faded away, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to press in from all sides. Lily continued to walk, her mind racing with thoughts of what she might discover. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting eerie shadows on the ground. She was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't notice the change in the air until it was too late. The temperature had dropped significantly, and the forest seemed to grow unnervingly still. She stopped in her tracks, her breath visible in the cold air. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she felt an uneasy sensation crawl up her spine. Something was wrong, but what? It was then that she heard it, a faint rustling in the bushes. At first it was barely noticeable, like the wind stirring the leaves. But then it grew louder, closer, as if something or someone was moving through the underbrush. Lily's heart raced as she spun around, her eyes searching the darkness for any sign of movement. Nothing, just the trees, the shadows, the oppressive silence. But the sound had not stopped. It was still there, just out of her sight. And now Lily could feel something else, a presence. She wasn't alone. A cold gust of wind swept through the trees, sending the leaves swirling around her. She turned back toward the village, ready to head home, but her legs felt heavy, as if the earth itself was holding her in place. The rustling grew louder, closer, and then from the corner of her eye, Lily saw it. A figure, tall and thin, shrouded in darkness, standing motionless at the edge of the trees. It was almost impossible to make out any details, but there was something about it, something wrong. The way it stood perfectly still, not even swaying in the breeze. The way it seemed to watch her with an unnerving intensity. Lily's breath caught in her throat, and before she could think, her legs propelled her forward, running as fast as she could, her footsteps pounding on the forest floor. The figure didn't move, it didn't follow. It simply stood there, watching her, its presence pressing down on her like a heavy weight. As she ran, the forest seemed to close in around her, the trees shifting and groaning as if they were alive, as if they were trying to trap her. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and she could hear the sound of her own breathing growing faster, more desperate. The path was a blur beneath her, and her legs burned with the effort. But no matter how fast she ran, the trees seemed to stretch on forever, the distance to the village never shortening. It was as though the forest was pulling her deeper into its grasp, and then she stumbled. Her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling to the ground. Pain shot through her body, and for a moment she lay there, gasping for breath, her heart racing. She tried to push herself up, but her arms felt weak. Her vision blurred as the darkness closed in around her. But then a voice, soft, whispering. It was coming from somewhere nearby, just out of reach. It was too faint to make out the words, but it sounded almost familiar, like the voice of someone she knew. Lily's eyes shot open. She wasn't alone. There was something in the dark, something watching her. Her body froze, and for a moment, she thought she might scream, but the voice was already fading, replaced by a horrible guttural growl, low and rumbling, like an animal hunting its prey. Lily's pulse raced, and before she could react, she felt that something cold and clammy wrapping around her ankle, pulling her back. She kicked and screamed, but the grip only tightened. "Help me," she cried out, but the only response was the growling, the sound of something moving toward her, slowly, deliberately. And then, from the edge of the forest, the figure appeared again. This time it was closer, much closer. Lily's eyes widened in terror. She could see it now, fully. A tall, thin creature, its limbs impossibly long, its skin stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes were wide and black, like endless pits of darkness, and its mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin. It stepped forward, its movements jerky, unnatural, as if it was not meant to walk this way. Lily tried to scream again, but the words caught in her throat. The creature loomed over her, its cold breath brushing against her face. It spoke then, its voice a low rasp. "You're not supposed to be here," it said. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she struggled against the creature's grip, but it only tightened. "Please, ... Please, let me go," she begged, tears streaming down her face, but the creature said nothing more. The last thing Lily saw before the darkness overtook her was the twisted smile of the creature, and the eyes, those black, endless eyes staring down at her. The forest had claimed her. and it would claim many more. Part 2. The wind continued to howl through the forest, carrying with it an unsettling chill that seemed to crawl beneath the skin. Lily's body lay still on the forest floor, her eyes closed, her chest barely rising with the faintest of breaths. She was alive but barely. The creature, its long limbs hovering like a shadow over her, did not leave. Instead, it lingered in the dark, watching her, studying her. The forest itself seemed to breathe with it, as if the trees and the very air had a life of their own, a life that had long ago forgotten the warmth of the sun. Lily's mind was clouded with confusion, her thoughts fogged as if wrapped in a blanket of smoke. She could hear the distant rustling of leaves, the soft murmur of voices that seemed to echo all around her. But they were not voices of comfort. They were whispers, indistinct, sinister, as if the forest was speaking to her in a language she could not understand. "Wake up," the voice rasped again, this time closer. It was a creature, its words slithering through the air like a cold breeze. Lily felt a sharp pain, like a needle pricking her skin, and her eyes snapped open, her body jerking awake. She found herself lying on the cold ground, staring up at the canopy of twisted trees. The moonlight filtered down in patches, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to shift with a life of their own. The forest was alive in ways that made Lily's heart pound in her chest, and her skin crawl with fear. Her leg burned. Where the creature had grabbed her, the sensation lingering like a mark that wouldn't fade. She moved slowly, painfully, as if her limbs no longer belonged to her. She looked around frantically, but the forest was silent now, its eerie stillness pressing in on her like a suffocating weight. The figure was gone. The creature that had haunted her seemed to have disappeared into the depths of the trees, its twisted smile fading into the shadows. But Lily knew better than to think it had left. It was still there, somewhere, watching her from the darkness. She pushed herself up, her breath shallow, her chest tight. She stumbled to her feet, barely, able to balance the ground beneath her, swaying, as though the earth itself was alive. The coldness of the night wrapped itself around her like a blanket, but it did little to numb the fear that gnawed at her insides. She had to get out of here. She had to escape. Lily forced her legs to move, her steps unsteady at first, but soon she found a rhythm, her mind fixated on the idea of reaching safety. The village. She had to make it to the village. If she could just get there, everything would be fine. The thought of home, of warmth and light, pushed her forward, each step taking her deeper into the heart of the forest, away from the place she had been. The wind seemed to grow stronger as she walked, the trees creaking and groaning above her. The shadows stretched longer, twisting like dark fingers reaching out to grab her. She tried not to look back, but the feeling of being pursued was overwhelming. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig beneath her feet made her heart race. And then she heard it again, the faintest of whispers floating on the wind. At first it was so soft she could hardly make it out, but then it grew louder, more distinct. Lily, her name. It came from somewhere deep within the forest, a voice so cold it made her blood run cold. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stopped dead in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was familiar, but not in a comforting way. It was the voice of something that should not exist. "Lily?" The whisper echoed again, this time from behind her. Her body tensed, her muscles freezing as a chill ran down her spine. She slowly turned, her gaze sweeping the forest around her, but there was nothing. Just the dark, the trees, and the shadows. Her heart pounded in her chest as the silence stretched on, stretching like an eternity, each second more suffocating than the last. The voice had stopped. The whispering had stopped. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. With every ounce of willpower she could muster, Lily forced herself to move forward again, each step a battle against the terror that threatened to paralyze her. She didn't know how far she had come, how deep into the forest she had wandered, but the village should have been close. It had to be. The trees thinned, the underbrush becoming less dense. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a flicker of light through the gaps in the trees, the faintest glow like the flickering of a distant candle, just beyond the horizon. Hope surged in her chest. She stumbled forward, faster now, her legs aching with every step, but the light seemed to grow further away. With every step she took, it moved just out of reach, as if mocking her desperate need for escape. Then she heard something else. The sound of footsteps, soft at first, like the shuffle of someone moving carefully through the underbrush. Lily froze, her heart skipping a beat as she turned toward the sound. It was him, the figure from earlier. She could see him now, standing between the trees, his long limbs impossibly thin and twisted, his features still obscured by the darkness. His eyes were wide, black pits, and his mouth was stretched into that same grotesque grin. His form seemed to flicker and shift in the shadows, as though he was not entirely real. His presence felt like a dark cloud hovering over her, pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. "Why are you running, Lily?" The voice rasped, and the creature took a step forward. Lily's legs shook beneath her, and she fought to keep herself standing. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. It was as though the very air around her had thickened, making it impossible to move. "Come closer," the creature said, its grin widening, the black eyes gleaming with malice. "You've wandered so far. Now you belong to the forest." Her breath caught in her throat as the darkness seemed to press in on her from all sides. She was trapped, and the forest, it was alive. Part 3. Lily's heart thundered in her chest, her breath shallow and erratic. The creature before her moved closer, its body bending and shifting unnaturally, each movement a slow and deliberate gesture. Its eyes never left hers, and that twisted grin stretched wider, like a promise of something dark and dreadful. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to escape, but every muscle in her body felt paralyzed. The creature was so close now that she could feel the coldness radiating from it, the air around her thick with a suffocating chill. It was as though the forest itself had frozen in time, and she was trapped in its deadly grasp. Why fight it? The creature's voice slithered through the night, a rasping whisper that seemed to vibrate in the air. The forest has already chosen you. You cannot escape what it wants. Lily swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. She could barely form words, but she managed to croak. What do you want from me?" The creature's grin deepened, and it cocked its head to one side, its long, slender neck creaking like old wood. "Oh, it's not what I want," it said softly. its voice almost tender in the cruelest way. It's what the forest wants. The woods have been waiting for you, Lily. Waiting for someone to take its place. Lily's stomach churned, a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. Her eyes darted around, searching for anything that might offer a chance of escape. The trees loomed over her like silent giants, their branches twisted and gnarled, their roots snaking beneath the earth like ancient serpents. The wind howled again, a mournful cry that echoed through the forest, but it was the only sound. The world had gone eerily silent, as though even nature itself held its breath. "I don't want to be here," Lily whispered, more to herself than to the creature, her voice barely audible. "Please, Dot, I just want to go home." The creature's laugh echoed through the trees, sharp and brittle like dry leaves crunching underfoot. "Home?" it sneered. "The forest is your home now, child. You belong to it as much as the trees, as much as the shadows that dance in the dark." Her pulse quickened. The words echoed in her mind, their meaning settling like a heavy weight on her chest. The forest? Her home? It was absurd. She had to get away from here, from this place, from the creature that seemed to crawl out of her darkest nightmares. But where could she go? The path to the village was lost now, swallowed up by the thick, darkened forest. The creature stepped closer, its long, bony fingers reaching out toward her. Its touch, cold and clammy, grazed the skin of her arm, and Lily recoiled instinctively, but there was nowhere to run. "Don't be afraid," it cooed, its voice almost soothing, like a mother comforting a frightened child. "You're not alone here. You've never been alone, Lily. The forest is full of us, waiting, watching, Lily's eyes flitted to the dark trees around her, and for the first time she saw them for what they truly were. The branches swayed unnaturally, twisting like fingers beckoning her toward them. The shadows beneath the trees were thick and shifting, moving in ways that should not have been possible. And then, as if in response to the creature's words, the darkness deepened further, closing in around her like a living thing. The whispers returned, louder now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to swirl around her, each one speaking in a language that Lily could not understand, but their tone was unmistakable. They were calling to her, pulling her into the abyss of the forest where the light of the moon no longer reached. "No, Dot. Lily murmured, backing away, her feet stumbling on the uneven ground. The creature's grip tightened on her arm, its long fingers digging into her skin, and she gasped as the pain flared through her body. "You cannot escape," the creature growled, its face inches from hers now. Its eyes, black as the night sky, glinted with an ancient hunger. "The forest will claim you, Lily. You are part of it now. You will be one of us." The grip on her arm pulled tighter, and her breath caught in her throat as the forest seemed to bend around her, the very air thickening, suffocating her. The whispers turned into a single unified voice, a low, guttural sound that filled her head with an overwhelming sense of dread. But Lily wasn't ready to give up. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, she yanked her arm free, breaking the creature's hold. She turned and ran, her feet crashing through the underbrush, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she fought to escape. The ground seemed to shift beneath her, the roots of the trees rising to trip her, but she pushed forward, driven by a single thought: escape. Her heart pounded in her chest. her body aching with every step, but she did not dare to look back. The forest was alive now, alive with the sound of movement, the whispers, the rustling of unseen things. It was as if the very trees themselves were reaching out for her, their branches like claws, and the shadows were twisting and writhing in the periphery of her vision. And then she saw it, the clearing. For a brief moment the trees parted, and the moonlight spilled into the space, bathing it in an eerie, silvery glow. In the center of the clearing was a massive stone arch, old and weathered, its surface covered in strange markings, symbols that Lily couldn't comprehend. It looked ancient, as though it had been standing there long before her birth, and for a fleeting moment she felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if the arch had been waiting for her. Without thinking, she sprinted toward it, her legs burning, her chest tight with fear and exertion. She didn't care about the arch. She didn't care about anything but getting away. She had to get through it, out of the forest, out of the reach of the creature. As she neared the arch, a low growl sounded from behind her, and she turned just in time to see the creature, its eyes burning with fury, step into the clearing. Its form flickered in the shadows, and it raised one long, clawed hand, as if to strike. "No, you can't leave," it shouted, its voice breaking the stillness of the night. But Lily was already through the arch. A blinding light surrounded her, and for a moment she felt weightless, as if the ground had disappeared. Beneath her, the forest, the creature, the darkness, they all vanished in an instant, replaced by a deafening silence. Then everything went black. Part 4. Lily's eyes snapped open, but the world around her was completely different. The thick, dark forest was gone. The whispers, the growls, the eerie presence of the creature, they were all gone. But in their place was something equally strange, something unsettling in its quiet stillness. She was lying on cold stone, her body stiff from the run, but there was no sense of the forest around her. No trees, no rustling leaves, no distant moonlight breaking through the canopy. Instead, she found herself in a cavernous space, its high ceilings lost in shadow. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and earth. Lily slowly sat up, her head spinning as the disorienting shift in reality tugged at her senses. She looked around, her eyes adjusting to the dim, flickering light that came from far-off sconces embedded in the walls. The walls themselves were jagged and uneven, carved with deep, ancient symbols she could not understand. They glimmered faintly, as though they held some forgotten power. Her chest tightened as she realized she was no longer in the forest. She had no idea how she had gotten here or where here was. The stone floor beneath her felt cold against her skin, and the air was heavy, almost suffocating. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and took a cautious step forward. The cavern was vast, stretching far beyond what her eyes could see, yet she felt the walls pressing in on her from all sides. The light was faint, but enough to cast long shadows across the stone. It was too quiet. The stillness felt like an oppressive weight filling the space around her, suffocating her, much like the feeling in the forest moments before. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to orient herself. She didn't know how she had made it through that arch, but something deep inside her told her that escaping the creature wasn't enough. She hadn't escaped the forest, not truly. No, the forest had followed her here, wherever here was. and then she heard it. A soft sound like a whisper, but not the faint, distant ones from before. This was closer. It was as though the very walls of the cavern were whispering to her, urging her to listen. Lily. The voice was familiar, and yet it wasn't. It was a low, echoing sound that seemed to reverberate in her bones. She froze, her breath caught in her throat, as the sound of her name echoed again, this time more urgently. Lily ... She spun around, searching the cavern. The shadows seemed to move, flicker in and out of existence as if they were alive, watching her. She couldn't see anyone. There was no one. The cavern stretched before her, empty except for the whispers that filled her mind. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice trembling, but it was swallowed by the cavernous void. Then, without warning, the floor beneath her feet shifted. It was so subtle at first that Lily thought it was just her mind playing tricks on her, but the stone beneath her feet groaned, and then the entire cavern seemed to breathe, shifting, moving, like it had just woken up from a long slumber. Lily's heart skipped a beat, her eyes widening in panic. She backed away from the spot where she had been standing, looking around for any sign of movement. Was the cavern alive? Was it another part of the forest that had followed her here? She didn't know, but she didn't care. She needed to escape, to find a way out. She turned sharply, looking for any path, any exit, but the walls were just as imposing, just as endless as before. She walked briskly, her footsteps echoing off. The stone, her pulse racing. The whispers intensified, now full of fragmented voices, distorted and jumbled. She could barely make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, a warning or a command. "Lily, you mustn't leave." The voice was coming from all around her now, seeping into her very soul until she could feel it in. The pit of her stomach, a deep, gnawing sensation that threatened to consume her. Her legs faltered beneath her, but she forced herself to keep moving, her breath shallow, her hands trembling as she ran her fingers along the cold stone walls for any sign of escape. And then she saw it, at the far end of the cavern, just beyond. The edge of the faint light, a faint glimmer like a crack in the stone, began to shimmer. It was barely noticeable at first, but as she moved closer, it grew brighter, glowing with an otherworldly light. The symbols on the walls began to pulse, their deep carvings flickering, as if they were alive, guiding her toward the crack. It was calling to her. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, to run in the opposite direction, but the glimmer was irresistible. It beckoned her, pulling her in, and before she could think, her feet were moving on their own. As she approached the crack, she saw it more clearly, now a narrow opening between two jagged pieces of stone, just wide enough for her to squeeze through. The light emanating from the crack was faint, but it seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, almost alive in its own right. Something deep inside her told her that this was the way out, that this was the answer. She had to go through it. She had no choice. With a mixture of fear and determination, Lily crawled toward the opening, her hands bracing against the cold stone as she squeezed through. The crack was tight, but it gave just enough room for her to slip through, her body scraping against the rough edges of the stone as she pushed forward. The moment she passed through, the air shifted again. The space on the other side was different. The light was brighter, warmer, and the oppressive weight of the cavern lifted. replaced by something else, something darker. She stood on the other side, her eyes adjusting to the dimly lit room. But what she saw sent a cold shiver down her spine. Before her was a vast ancient altar surrounded by candles that flickered in the dim light, their flames dancing in rhythm with the pulsating energy of the space. The stone altar was inscribed with more of the strange symbols, and there, standing before it, was the last thing she ever expected to see. The creature. It was waiting for her. Its grotesque form was looming over the altar, its long arms outstretched, fingers twitching like spiders waiting to strike. Its black eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time it spoke, its voice a low, guttural growl. "You cannot leave," it said, its smile stretching unnaturally wide. "Not yet." Lily stood frozen, her body trembling in terror. There was nowhere to run. She was trapped, the creature closing in on her once again, and she realized with a sickening clarity that she had walked right into its web. Part 5. The creature's presence was overwhelming, suffocating. Lily stood frozen in place, her eyes locked onto the creature's unervingly calm face, though her body screamed for her to run. But where would she go? The altar behind her, the glowing symbols on the walls, and the suffocating air, they all closed in around her. The chamber felt like a trap, and she was the prey. The creature stepped forward, its long, spindly limbs creaking with each movement, like the snapping of brittle branches. Its fingers, elongated and sharp as claws, curled slightly as though ready to snatch her up at any moment. Its dark eyes glimmered with an unsettling, otherworldly hunger. "You're here now," the creature whispered, its voice a low, rasping hum that vibrated in the very air around her. "This place was always meant for you, Lily, for you and others like you." The words made no sense, yet something about them felt undeniable. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow and quick. She didn't understand what it meant, but instinct told her this was something far worse than she could ever imagine. She was at the heart of something ancient, something that had been watching, waiting for her. "Why me?" She managed to gasp, her voice hoarse with fear. "What do you want with me?" The creature's grin stretched even wider, the skin around its mouth cracking like dry earth under the pressure. It leaned closer, its breath cold and rank, and the smell of decay filled Lily's nostrils. Her stomach churned. "You're the chosen one," it said, its voice now almost tender, as if it were explaining a simple truth. "The forest chose. You, Lily, you came, despite the warnings. You wandered deeper than any of the others, and now you belong." A cold wave of realization crashed over Lily. The forest, the arch, the whispers, everything had been leading her here, to this moment. The creature was right. She had wandered too far, ignored the signs, and now she was trapped, entwined in the forest's web. "Belong?" Lily whispered in disbelief, shaking her head. "I don't belong here. I never wanted this. I just wanted to leave." The creature's smile faltered for a brief moment, as if considering her words. Then it straightened up, and the dark, empty eyes turned away, scanning the altar behind her. The symbols carved into the stone flickered, glowing faintly. Lily turned, following its gaze, and realized that the altar wasn't just an object. It was a gateway. She could feel its power thrumming beneath her feet, vibrating through the stone, through her very bones. This altar, the creature murmured softly, as if to itself. It's the source, the beginning, ... and the end. Lily's confusion grew as her pulse quickened. The beginning and the end? What are you talking about? What is this place? The creature tilted its head, considering her question for a moment. This is the heart of the forest, the place where all paths converge. It's where the old magic lives, where the forest's will is made manifest. It calls to those like you, those who can hear its whispers, feel its hunger, and once the chosen one comes, they become part of it. Lily took an instinctive step back, her shoes scraping against the cold stone, her body trembling. I don't want to be part of it. Please, let me go. The creature's smile returned, but this time there was no warmth in it, only the chilling promise of something far darker. You cannot go, Lily. Not now. Not after all this time. You've already crossed the line. The forest has already claimed you. But perhaps you're ready to understand. Before Lily could react, the creature lifted its long arm, and with a swift motion, it pointed toward the altar. The symbols on the stone pulsed again, and Lily felt a strange pull, a magnetic force that seemed to draw her in. She could feel it in her chest, in the depths of her soul, a deep, knowing urge to step forward, to place herself before the altar. No, no, she cried out, her voice breaking. I won't. But the creature's eyes flashed, its black, pupils dilating, and for a moment Lily felt herself freeze in place. The pull was too strong, like an invisible hand curling around her heart. She couldn't resist it. Slowly, painfully, her feet began to move on their own. It was as though her body no longer belonged to her. Every step felt heavy, and yet she was compelled to continue. The creature watched her closely, its twisted grin never faltering. It is inevitable. You will see what you are meant to see. Lily's legs shook as she reached the edge of the altar, her hands reaching out to touch the stone. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a rush of energy surged through her, like lightning coursing through her veins. The symbols on the altar flared to life, glowing brighter and brighter until they were blinding. Her vision blurred, and for a brief moment, Lily felt as though she were falling through time, through space. The world around her seemed to dissolve, replaced by flashes of images, of sounds disjointed and fragmented. She saw the forest, not as it was now, but in its ancient form, long before her time. She saw its dark, unyielding power, its hunger. She saw the creatures that roamed within it, the shadows that whispered in the night. And through it all, she felt the pull, the irresistible call of the forest's heart, beckoning her. She screamed, her voice echoing through the cavern, but it was no use. The energy around her intensified, and she could feel the forest's essence creeping into her very soul, twisting it, claiming it as its own. She tried to pull away, to break free, but her body wouldn't obey. The creature's voice whispered in her ear, low and mocking. You are the chosen one, Lily. You are no longer human. You belong to the forest. You always have. And as the light from the altar blazed brighter than ever, Lily felt herself slip away, her identity, her will, her very essence dissolving into the forest's insatiable hunger. Part 6. Lily's body trembled as the blinding light from the altar enveloped her, its cold, sharp energy pulsing in waves through her limbs. She could feel herself being consumed, swallowed whole by the force of the forest's will. Her mind screamed in protest, but her voice was lost to the oppressive hum of the power that flowed around her, through her, filling every inch of her being. The creature stood motionless, watching her with its empty black eyes, its twisted grin widening. You feel it now, don't you? The forest. It's in you. It has always been in you. Lily's heart raced, her thoughts muddled, struggling to make sense of what was happening. She could hear the distant whispers again, but they weren't the same now. They were clearer, sharper, and filled with a malevolent intent. The voices of the forest had no mercy. They weren't calling to her anymore, they were controlling her. For a brief moment, she thought she would pass out. The power of the forest was too much. It was as if her very cells were being rewritten, her humanity being stripped away, piece by piece. She could feel the deep roots of the trees reaching into her very soul, the darkness seeping in through every crack, claiming what remained of her mind. Then a sudden clarity washed over her. A whisper in the back of her mind, a soft, desperate cry for survival. "Fight it, Lily, fight it." The voice was faint but familiar. It was hers. Her own voice, distant but still present. With every ounce of strength she had left, Lily focused on that voice, clinging to the flicker of her humanity that still lingered somewhere deep inside. She forced her legs to move, her body shuddering as she tried to push away from the altar. The pull of the forest was unbearable, but she refused to let it consume her entirely. She reached out with her trembling hands, her fingers scraping against the stone altar, trying to push herself away from the heart of the forest's power. The energy crackled around her like a thunderstorm, threatening to tear her apart. But she fought through the pain, desperate to break free. The creature saw her struggle, its eyes narrowing in annoyance. It stepped forward, its limbs moving with unnatural speed, and placed a cold, bony hand on her shoulder. "You cannot escape," it hissed. "The forest has claimed you. You are part of it now. You always will be." But Lily, fueled by a surge of determination, pulled away from its touch, stumbling backward toward the edge of the cavern. Her chest heaved, and her breaths came in ragged gasps. The forest's power still thrummed beneath her skin, but she could feel it weakening, its grip loosening just a little bit. "No," Lily managed to say through clenched teeth, her voice hoarse. "I won't let you have me." The creature's smile faltered, its expression twisting into something more sinister. It bared its teeth, sharp as knives. "You cannot fight what is inevitable. You are a part of the forest now. There is no escape." But as it spoke, Lily noticed something. The symbols carved into the stone of the altar flickered, their glowing light dimming, as if the connection between her and the forest was beginning to fray. The voices, the whispers that had once filled her mind with their dreadful commands, were growing quieter, fading into the distance. She had to act quickly. She didn't have much time. Lily's hand found a jagged rock at the edge of the altar, its surface rough and sharp. She grabbed it, her fingers slipping around the cold stone as she lifted it high. The creature's eyes followed her every movement, its grin returning, but this time there was something darker in it, something far more dangerous. "You think you can stop this?" It laughed. You think you can break free from what's already been set in motion?" Lily's hand tightened around the stone, and without hesitation, she slammed it down on the altar, striking the symbols with all her might. The moment the rock made contact, the cavern shook. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and a deep, resonant sound echoed through the walls. The symbols on the altar flashed with blinding light, and the energy that had been coursing through Lily's body surged, rippling outward in a wave of power that pushed against the creature. The creature howled in fury, its form flickering and distorting as though the very fabric of its being was unraveling. "No, you can't. But the words were drowned out by the sound of the altar cracking, the stone splitting down the middle, releasing a pulse of energy so powerful that it sent Lily flying backward. She landed hard on the cold stone floor, her body aching, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She had to get away. Lily pushed herself to her feet, barely able to stand, but she forced her legs to move, stumbling toward the edge of the cavern. The creature was still howling, its form wavering, as if it were losing its grip on reality. The air around her was thick with the residual energy of the forest, but Lily felt it weakening, fading. It was as though the heart of the forest was dying, its power slowly ebbing away. With one final desperate push, Lily made it to the edge of the cavern, where the walls began to thin, where the light of the world outside flickered. She could hear the wind, soft and distant, as though it were calling her back to the world she had left behind. But the creature was not finished. It lunged toward her, its claws outstretched, but Lily, summoning every last ounce of strength, ran. She leapt through the opening, feeling the air rush past her, the world spinning around her, and then, with a deafening roar, the creature's voice was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the cavern. The forest's power had been broken. The wind grew louder, and Lily found herself once again standing at the edge of the forest. But this time it was different. The trees no longer loomed with that same oppressive presence. The air felt lighter, the whispers had gone silent, and the shadows no longer reached for her. Lily stood there for a long moment, her breath coming in heavy gasps, her mind still, reeling from everything that had happened. But as she looked up, she saw the first light of dawn breaking through the trees, casting a golden glow over the forest. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt free, but she knew she would never forget what had happened here. The forest had tried to claim her, to twist her into something else, but she had fought back. And though the darkness had receded for now, Lily knew that the forest's hunger would always linger, waiting for the next lost soul to wander too deep. As the sun rose, Lily turned away from the forest, her heart heavy, but her steps resolute. She had survived, and the forest would never have her. Part 7. The sun slowly climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows behind Lily as she walked away from the forest. Her steps were unsteady, her body exhausted, but there was a sense of relief that washed over her with each step she took. The weight of the forest's power, the grip of the creature, the suffocating darkness, they were all fading, as though they were never truly real, a bad dream from which she had awoken. But deep inside her, there was a gnawing emptiness, a silence that echoed in the pit of her stomach. She had escaped, yes, but the forest had marked her. It had claimed her, and now there was no turning back. It wasn't over. She could feel it in the air, in the quiet that followed her like a shadow, creeping closer, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lily's heart pounded as she glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the trees at the edge of the clearing. The forest was still there, standing like a sentinel, its dark, twisted trees waiting patiently. She couldn't help but feel as though the forest was watching her, waiting for her to slip, to falter. She kept walking, faster now, her pace quickening as she made her way through the narrow path that led back to the village. The air was cooler now, the wind carrying a scent of earth and dampness, as though it was still carrying the forest's breath with it. The distant sound of birds chirping filled the silence, but it did little to ease the tension in her chest. It felt wrong. Lily could hear the faint whispers again, but this time they weren't coming from the forest. They were inside her mind, soft, indistinct, like a memory she couldn't quite place. The voices from the forest, the dark presence, it was all beginning to creep back in. The energy of the forest had followed her. It had latched onto her, and now it was a part of her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. That something was waiting for her. Her legs ached, and she stumbled once, but she kept going. She had to get home. She had to see her family. Her mind reeled at the thought of her parents, of the life she had left behind in the village. But the closer she got, the more distant. That comfort seemed. The village felt like a world away, a place where the forest's grip didn't reach, except she knew better. The forest's tendrils stretched far, farther than she could imagine. It would never truly leave her. As she approached the edge of the village, she felt a sudden shift in the air, a cool breeze that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She turned instinctively, her eyes scanning the path behind her, but there was nothing. Just the trees, their twisted shapes looming in the distance, as if they were beckoning her back. A chill ran down her spine. She reached the outskirts of the village, the familiar sight of the stone houses, the market square, the cobbled streets. Everything was just as it had been when she left. Nothing had changed. The people were going about their daily routines, unaware of the darkness that lurked in the forest, unaware of what Lily had just survived. But Lily wasn't the same. She had felt the forest's power, its presence. She had felt it take root inside her, deep within her soul. And though she was home, she didn't feel safe. She didn't feel at peace. It was then that she saw someone, a figure standing just beyond the village, at the edge of the woods, watching her. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make out the figure. It was tall, thin, and cloaked in shadow, its face hidden beneath the hood of its cloak. The figure didn't move, just stood there, staring at her from the distance. The whispers in her mind grew louder. They weren't from the forest anymore, but from the figure. This person, whoever they were, was the next part of the puzzle. She knew it in her bones. She had to approach them. She had to know who they were. Her feet moved of their own accord, and before she realized it, she was walking toward the figure, her steps quick and sure. The whispers, now louder than ever, filled her head, urging her forward. As she drew closer, the figure finally moved. It stepped into the light, and Lily's breath caught in her throat. It was the creature, but it wasn't just the creature anymore. It had changed. Its form was still twisted, long limbs and gaunt features, but now there was something different about it, something more human. It was standing before her, cloaked and tall, its hood pulled back to reveal a face she had seen before. The face that had haunted her dreams, the face of the forest, the thing that had whispered her name in the dark. It was her. Lily staggered back, her heart hammering in her chest. The face before her was hers, but older, twisted, hollow. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, this can't be real." The creature had tilted its head, its dark eyes glinting in the dim light. "Oh, but it is, Lily. It's all real. You can't escape it." Lily's legs trembled beneath her, and she stumbled backward, the weight of the creature's gaze pressing down on her like a physical force. "What are you? What is this?" The creature smiled, a cold, twisted smile that made her stomach churn. "I am what you are becoming, Lily. I am the part of you that you cannot deny. You have been chosen like the others before you, and now there is no escaping the forest. It has claimed you. You will carry it inside you always." Lily's breath came in short, shallow gasps. "No, no, I won't let it." "You already have," the creature interrupted, its voice low and mocking. "The moment you walked into the forest, it took root in you. You may not understand it now, but you will. You are a part of it. And it ... It will never let you go." Lily took a step back, her feet slipping on the cobblestone street. The creature advanced slowly, its eyes never leaving hers. "You're wrong," Lily said, her voice trembling but strong. "I won't. Become what you are. I'll fight this. I'll destroy it. I won't let the forest take me." The creature's smile faded, and for a moment it seemed almost sad. "You're already lost, Lily. You just don't know it yet." With that, it stepped back into the shadows, its form blending with the darkness as if it were part of it. And Lily stood there, trembling, alone on the edge of the village, staring into the place she had once thought was safe. She had escaped the forest, or so she thought. But now Lily realized the truth. The forest had never truly let her go. The darkness had followed her, and it would always be with her. The whispers in her mind grew louder, more insistent, and, for the first time, Lily knew with absolute certainty she was never truly free. Part 8. Lily stood alone on the edge of the village, her mind racing, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature, herself, twisted and shadowed, had vanished into the dark. It had told her she was lost, told her that the forest had claimed her, that it would never let her go. But how? How could she be lost when she was standing here, in the light, in the village that had always been her home? The streets were quiet, the villagers moving about their business as though nothing had changed. Everything was as it had been before. But Lily knew it wasn't the same. The whispers still echoed in her mind, faint but insistent, as though the forest was calling to her, pulling her back. She clutched her chest, her breath ragged. The presence of the forest, of the creature, lingered deep inside her, threading through her very thoughts. She could feel the pull, the urge to turn back, to return to the dark woods where everything had begun. It wasn't just a physical feeling, it was something darker, more insidious, something alive inside her. But she had fought, hadn't she? She had broken free. She had escaped, hadn't she? Lily stumbled forward, her feet dragging as she tried to shake the feeling of being trapped in an endless loop. Her hand brushed the cobblestone wall of the nearest house, and she paused, staring at the houses around her. She wanted to scream, but the scream died in her throat. The village felt alien, unfamiliar, like a mask hiding something far more sinister. She turned and looked behind her once more. The forest loomed on the horizon, a dark line against the sky. But it wasn't just the forest that haunted her now. It was the creature. Her. Lily shuddered at the thought. She knew deep down in her bones that she could never outrun it. It was inside her. It had always been inside her. The forest had chosen her long ago, and no matter how hard she fought, she would never escape it. But what was she supposed to do? "You're not safe," a voice whispered from behind her. Lily froze. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. She had heard that voice before. It was the same voice she had heard in the forest, the one that had whispered in her mind, pulling her deeper into the darkness. She knew now that it had been there all along, always following her, always waiting for her to break. "Asterisk, leave me." "A lone asterisk," she whispered, her voice hoarse, pleading. But the voice persisted, its tone almost mocking. "Asterisk, you can never leave, Lily. Not now. Not when the forest has already touched you. Asterisk." Her hands shook, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but the voice was everywhere now. It echoed in her head, filling her thoughts, drowning out everything else. The whispers grew louder. They were like claws scratching at her mind, pulling at the edges of her sanity. "Asterisk, it's all inside you. You can't escape. The forest is in your blood." Asterisk Lily stumbled backward, her eyes wide, her body trembling as though the ground beneath her was crumbling away. She spun around, her eyes scanning the village, looking for anyone, anything to help her. But the streets were empty. No one was watching. No one could see the darkness closing in around her. "Please duck, duck," she whispered to herself, though she knew no one could hear her. She was alone. She turned again, and as her eyes found the distant outline of the forest, a conch, horrible, undeniable truth hit her. The forest had been inside her the entire time. The whispers, the visions of the creature, the pool, everything had been part of her. The more she tried to fight it, the stronger it became. The creature wasn't some external force. It was a reflection of something inside her, something dark and twisted that the forest had awakened. She had never truly left. The ground beneath her feet shifted again, and before she could react, the earth cracked open. The rift spread wide like a wound in the earth itself, and from it a low guttural growl rose. The air around her became thick with a terrible pressure, and she felt the familiar cold, the same cold that had suffocated her in the forest. She screamed, stepping back, but there was nowhere to go. The creature her emerged from the darkness, its form tall and impossible, its limbs stretching far beyond what was human. It towered over her, its long fingers reaching out, its face contorting in a grin that was her own, twisted and unnatural. "You're mine, Lily," the creature said, its voice a mockery of her own. "You always have been." Lily's chest tightened, her breaths shallow, but she refused to let herself break. She had come this far, hadn't she? She had fought her way through the forest against the creature. She had escaped the darkness before, and she would again. "Not anymore," she spat, stepping back as she steadied herself. "I won't let you control me." The creature's eyes flashed with an unsettling gleam, its grin widening even further. "You think you have a choice? You've already made your decision. You can't escape what you are, Lily. You belong to me." But as it reached for her, Lily did something she hadn't done before. She fought. She turned and ran, her feet pounding against the cobblestones as the creature's laugh echoed in her mind, dark and hollow. She could hear its footsteps behind her, growing louder with every stride, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. She had to push forward, past the haunting whispers, past the dark creature that had tried to claim her. She ran through the chill streets, her legs burning, her heart racing. And then, without warning, she stumbled into the forest. But this time she didn't feel the same overwhelming pull. It was different now. The whispers were gone. The darkness was no longer a force that held her captive. She had taken control. She had claimed her freedom. The creature's shadow loomed over her, but Lily refused to falter. She knew what she had to do. With one final breath, she raised her hands to the sky, and the light of the setting sun broke through the dark trees. "I won't let you win," she said, her voice strong, and the forest, for the first time, remained silent. Part 9. The forest around Lily stood still, as though the very trees were holding their breath. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the light of the setting sun pierced through the canopy in narrow golden beams, illuminating the path ahead of her. The creature herself, twisted and dark, lingered in the shadows, but Lily felt something shift deep within her, like a sudden surge of power that she could barely comprehend. She had always believed that the forest's grip on her had been inevitable, that its darkness had taken root inside her, that she was somehow bound to it, destined to become one with the shadows. But now, as she stood in the very heart of the forest, she realized something profound. It wasn't inevitable. It was choice. The whispers that had once plagued her thoughts were now silent, replaced by the calm stillness of the woods, and Lily felt a newfound strength coursing through her veins. She was no longer the frightened girl who had wandered into the forest. She wasn't the helpless child that had run from the darkness. She was something else now, something more. The forest could no longer control her. She had taken back her power. The creature, her dark twin, emerged from the shadows, its form twisting unnaturally as it approached. Its smile stretched wider, and its black eyes burned with an intensity that could freeze a soul. But Lily did not flinch. Her breath was steady. Her feet were firm beneath her. She stood tall, unwavering, even as the creature grew nearer. "You think you've won?" the creature hissed, its voice low and mocking, but there was a tremor beneath it. "You think you can break free from what you are? From me?" Lily shook her head slowly. "No, I think I've finally realized what I am, and I'm not you. I'm not what the forest wants me to be." The creature's grin faltered, and it took a step back, its long fingers twitching in the air as if unsure of what to do. The forest seemed to respond to its hesitation, the wind rustling through the leaves, but the silence was oppressive, as if the very world was waiting for a conclusion. "You are me," the creature snarled, its voice sharp and brittle. "We are one. The forest chose you. You can't escape that. You belong to the shadows, to the darkness. You'll never be free." Lily stood her ground, her eyes locked on the creature, and for the first time she felt no fear. "I choose who I am. I choose what I carry inside me, and I choose light I'm not bound to the darkness anymore. I won't let it claim me. Not now, not ever. The creature's eyes blazed with fury. You fool. You cannot escape what has been written in the roots of the forest. You will always be a part of it. The shadows will always find you. Lily's voice was calm, but it rang with certainty. The forest doesn't own me. I've broken its hold. You don't get to define me anymore. The creature screeched, a sound so high and raw that it reverberated through the very ground beneath them. The trees groaned in response, and the wind picked up, howling like a wild animal. The air around them crackled with energy as the forest seemed to fight against her words. But Lily stood firm, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out toward the darkness that surrounded her. She felt the energy of the forest, the power that had once terrified her, now pulsing in her veins. She could feel it, the deep, ancient magic that had run through the trees for centuries. But instead of cowering before it, she embraced it. She controlled it. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, and with every ounce of willpower, she pulled the energy toward her. The forest seemed to resist, but Lily held on. She could feel the creature's presence, dark and consuming, but she did not let it define her. The roots of the trees wrapped around her like a protective shield, as if the forest itself had accepted her new power. She had become its equal, no longer its prey. The ground trembled beneath her feet, but this time it wasn't the creature's rage that caused it. It was the strength of her resolve. Lily opened her eyes, and as she did, the air around her shimmered with an ethereal glow. The trees seemed to sway in time with her, their branches stretching toward the sky, as if in acknowledgement. The darkness that had once surrounded her began to recede slowly, as though it couldn't bear her light. "Do you see now?" Lily said, her voice steady but powerful. "The forest's power doesn't have to be feared. It doesn't have to control me. I can live with it, but I don't have to become it." The creature's twisted form wavered, as if losing its strength. Its eyes flickered with something between rage and disbelief. You think you can take control of the forest?" Lily nodded. "I don't have to take control. I just have to accept it." The creature's mouth opened in a silent snarl, its form beginning to flicker, like the last remnants of a nightmare fading in the morning light. And then, with a final scream, it crumbled into the air, dissolving like mist beneath the bright rays of the sun. Lily watched as the dark figure of her shadow self dissipated, vanishing into nothingness. The forest around her, the trees, the roots, the whispers, they all seemed to exhale, a deep, ancient sigh of relief. She stood there, breathing heavily, but with a sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. The forest was still there, but it was no longer a threat. It was no longer her prison. For the first time, she felt truly free. The wind shifted once more, and a soft, warm breeze brushed against her face, as though the forest was offering her a silent, knowing acceptance. The shadows receded, and the moonlight shone bright, bathing the clearing in silver light. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the quiet. She had faced the darkest part of herself and the forest, and she had conquered it. She was not bound by the darkness. She was free to choose her own path, free to decide who she would become. And as she stood in that moment with the forest's ancient power flowing through her veins, she realized that the forest's hunger had never truly been for her. It had only been for her to embrace her own power. And now, for the first time, she could hear the whispers not as a threat, but as a song of possibility. The forest would never claim her again. The forest had become hers. Part 10. The dawn broke quietly over the forest, its soft rays spilling through the canopy and casting gentle light on the ground. The oppressive weight of darkness had lifted, and the forest now felt alive in a new way, its breath no longer cold and suffocating, but warm and inviting, as though it had found peace after years of struggle. Lily stood still in the heart of the forest, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the ancient power that flowed through her, now a part of her, but no longer something to fear. She looked around, her eyes searching the trees, the vastness of the trash forest before her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt no dread. The dark whispers had gone silent, and there were no more twisted figures lurking in the shadows. The world had shifted, and she had shifted with it. She was no longer the girl who had ventured into the forest all those months ago, seeking answers. She wasn't the frightened child who had been haunted by nightmares and whispers. She was something else now, stronger, more whole. The forest wasn't something to run from, it was something to understand. It was a part of the world, a part of nature's balance, and now she understood it in a way she never had before. It was both a blessing and a curse. But the curse was gone now. The forest no longer had control over her. Lily walked through the trees, her steps slow and deliberate. The forest seemed to part before her, the path opening up as if the woods themselves were guiding her, acknowledging her as part of their world. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the rhythm of life, ancient and steady. It was like she had become a part of the natural order, not a prisoner of it. She reached a clearing, and at the center stood the great stone arch that had once seemed so ominous, so final. It had been the gateway to her journey into the heart of darkness. But now, as she stood before it, it didn't feel like a boundary. It felt like a bridge between the past and the future. The arch shimmered softly in the sunlight, and Lily could sense something new, something unfamiliar, but also something deeply familiar. She stepped toward it, her hand reaching out to touch the cool stone. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the forest around her seemed to pulse, a deep, resonant hum that echoed through her chest. And then the stone began to change. The symbols that had once glowed with malevolent energy now shimmered with a soft, radiant light. The once ancient, dark power that had clung to them began to dissolve, replaced by a warmth that filled the air. It was as though the arch was breathing, coming to life in a way that had never been possible before. Lily stood still, awestruck, as the light grew brighter. She could feel something new beginning to unfold, not just within her, but within the very forest itself. She wasn't sure how, but she knew that the forest had shifted, that it had changed, and so had she. Lily, a voice whispered softly. It was her own voice, but this time it wasn't a voice of fear or darkness. It was a voice of understanding, of connection. The forest had once been a force of chaos, something that consumed, twisted, and darkened. But now it was alive with potential. It wasn't just hers anymore, it was a part of the world that could grow, that could heal. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said aloud, the words steady, confident. "I'm not running," anymore. For a moment, nothing happened. But then a gentle breeze stirred the trees, and for the first time Lily felt that the wind was not a warning. It was a welcome. The forest accepted her. It was no longer an adversary, it was a companion. The whispers in her mind faded, replaced by the sound of life and the forest's song. The trees swayed in unison, and the earth beneath her feet seemed to hum with life. It was a song that Lily hadn't heard before, one filled with hope, with understanding, with balance. She had crossed the line. She had stepped into the unknown and survived. But in doing so, she had found something even more powerful than survival. She had found peace. The arch before her pulsed one last time, and Lily knew that the journey she had taken, the battle she had fought, had changed everything. She was not the same girl who had wandered into the woods all those months ago. She was stronger. She was wiser. She was no longer just a victim of the forest's power. She was its keeper. Her heart swelled with the knowledge that the forest's heart was not a dark, dangerous thing to fear. It was something to understand, to protect, and to live with. She would carry it within her, just as she carried the knowledge of the balance between light and dark. And now the forest would be hers to guide, to protect, just as she had been chosen to protect it. No longer a prisoner of the shadows, Lily had become the forest's ally, its protector. As she turned away from the arch and looked into the endless stretch of trees before her, Lily smiled. She was free. The darkness had been vanquished, and with it a new beginning had been born. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of what lay ahead. The forest was alive, and so was she. Part 11. The forest had accepted Lily, but the world beyond its borders was far less forgiving. The power she had harnessed, the strength she'd found within herself, had marked her in ways she hadn't fully understood. The peace she had discovered in the woods felt fragile, like a delicate balance that could be disturbed with a single wrong step. Now, as she walked deeper into the world she thought she knew, the village lying just beyond the forest's edge, she could feel the weight of everything that had changed. The forest was no longer a distant, unreachable thing. It was a part of her. But the world outside didn't understand that. They wouldn't know what had transpired. They wouldn't understand what she had become. Lily glanced over her shoulder. One last time at the forest, now bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. The trees were calm, their twisted branches no longer oppressive. The whispers were gone, replaced by the sound of birds and the rustling of leaves. But even with that peace, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was waiting. The village stretched out before her, a collection of stone cottages and cobblestone streets that she had known all her life. But as she walked deeper into the heart of it, Lily felt the distance between herself and the people she once called family and friends. They couldn't possibly understand what she had experienced in the forest. They couldn't see what she had become, and deep down she realized they might never be able to. The people who lived in the village were still bound by the same rules they had always followed. Their lives were mundane, peaceful, but their world was also ignorant of the forest's power, ignorant of the darkness that lurked in the shadows, ignorant of the choices they would never be able to make. The forest was alive, and it had touched her, but would they ever accept that? Would they ever see the truth that she now carried within her? Lily? A voice called out, snapping her from her thoughts. She turned and saw a familiar face, a face from her past. It was. Marjorie, a childhood friend, her face lined with concern. She had been a comfort to Lily before she had left, always a quiet presence in her life. I was beginning to think you weren't coming back, Marjorie said, a half smile on her lips. Where have you been? Lily hesitated, trying to find the right words. She didn't want to lie, but how could she explain everything she had seen? How could she explain the power she had unlocked? The creature? The forest? I had to go, Lily said softly, her gaze shifting to the distant forest. I had to understand something about myself, about the world. Marjorie's brow furrowed. Understand something? You've been gone for months, Lily. Everyone's been worried sick. Lily looked into her friend's eyes, but instead of the warmth she once felt, she saw only concern, a concern that seemed to grow as she stared. I'm not the same anymore, Marjorie. I can't just be who I was before. Marjorie looked puzzled, stepping closer. What do you mean? You're still you, aren't you? You've just been through something difficult. We can help you get back to normal. You can heal from it. The words stung. Normal. She wasn't sure she could ever be normal again. No, Lily said, her voice steady, but with an edge of something darker. I'm not who I was before. I can't be. Marjorie opened her mouth to say something more, but before she could speak, a distant cry echoed through the village. It was high-pitched and desperate, a cry that sent a chill through the air. People in the village paused, looking around in confusion, their eyes wide with uncertainty. What was that? Marjorie whispered, her voice tinged with fear. Lily didn't answer immediately. The air had shifted once again, and this time the feeling of unease wasn't something she could shake off. The forest, her forest, had not let her go. It wasn't just watching her anymore. It was reaching beyond the trees, calling to something darker. I have to go, Lily said, her voice almost frantic now. She didn't know what that cry meant, but she could feel it. The forest was stirring, and she had to face it. The balance was fragile, and something was threatening to tip it into chaos again. Wait, Lily? Marjorie called after her, but Lily was already running toward the sound, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know why, but she felt it deep inside her. The darkness was calling, and she had no choice but to answer. The cry echoed again, louder this time, and as Lily reached the village's edge, she saw it. A figure emerging from the tree line, a figure that was tall, shadowed, and moving with unnatural speed. Lily stopped dead in her tracks, her body stiffening as she recognized the figure. It was the creature, or something like it. But it wasn't the same as before. It was different, darker, its form shifting, as if it were made of the very shadows of the forest. But it wasn't just the creature. It was the forest, or rather what the forest had become. Something had corrupted it. The forest had awoken again, but it was not the peaceful, ancient place she had come to understand. It was something more dangerous now, something more alive. The figure stopped in the middle of the village, its head tilted as it surveyed the people who had gathered at the edges of the streets, watching in horror. Lily, it said, its voice a low, guttural growl that sent shivers through her. It was her voice, but distorted, twisted by the darkness that had taken root in the forest. You can't stop it. The forest is alive. Lily's heart sank. The forest had always been alive, but it had been kept in balance. Something had broken that balance, something beyond her control. The cry she had heard, it wasn't just a warning. It was the sound of the forest calling, and it wanted something more from her. Lily took a step forward, her heart heavy. "I'll stop it," she whispered to herself. "I have to." Part 12. The village stood still as the creature, loomed in the center of the street, its eyes glowing with an unnatural, malevolent light. The villagers, too terrified to move, stood frozen in their places, their eyes wide with shock and fear. The air around them was thick with a strange tension, a feeling that everything they knew was about to change forever. Lily's feet felt rooted to the spot as she stared at the twisted form before her. It had her voice, her face, but it was not her. It was something else, something darker, something forged in the deepest corners of the forest's power. The whispers in her mind grew louder, as if the creature was feeding them, encouraging them to return to her, to reclaim her. She could feel it crawling beneath her skin, the weight of the forest's corruption pressing down on her chest. "I'm not who I was," she whispered to herself, though the words felt weak, unsure. She had been trying to hold on to the person she had been before the forest had claimed her. But now, standing before this twisted shadow of herself, she realized that the forest had never truly let go. It was inside her, as much a part of her as her own breath. The creature, her, smiled, the expression twisted and filled with malevolent amusement. "You think you can escape it, Lily? You think you can control it?" It laughed, the sound, deep and grating. "You are the forest, and the forest is you. No matter how far you run, no matter how much you try to fight it, it will consume you." Lily felt the forest stirring beneath her feet. It was not a peaceful energy anymore. It was hungry, angry, pulsing with dark power. The weight of the creature's words settled in her mind, like a truth she could no longer deny. The forest was a part of her. It had always been a part of her. Her hand trembled at her side, but there was no fear in her heart, not anymore. The battle had never been about escaping the forest. It had always been about understanding it. She was not the forest's prisoner. She was its keeper, its guide. She had chosen to embrace its power, to live with it, not let it define her. But this this creature was something else. It was what the forest could become when consumed by greed, by darkness, and it was threatening to overrun everything. "No," she said, her voice stronger now, cutting through the tension in the air. "I am not the forest. I am its guardian. You're what happens when it is corrupted. But I will stop you." The creature's smile faded, replaced by a look of cruel amusement. "You cannot stop it. The corruption has spread too far. The balance has been broken. It will consume everything, Lily. You will be consumed. It has already begun." As if to prove its point, the earth beneath their feet trembled again, this time more violently. The ground cracked, and the village square erupted in a shower of stone and dirt. From the cracks, dark tendrils of roots and vines began to emerge, writhing and twisting as they reached for anything in their path. The once familiar streets began to distort, shifting and warping as the dark forest's corruption spread outward, consuming everything in its wake. Lily's heart raced. She could feel the weight of it, the forest's anger, its hunger. It was rising, and it was coming for everything. She couldn't allow it to spread any further. Not like this. The creature took another step forward, its long fingers curling in anticipation. It's already too late. The forest is alive. The forest is coming for you. The villagers screamed and scattered, running for safety. But Lily didn't move. She didn't run. This was her fight. This was her responsibility. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the energy of the forest wash over her once again. She had learned its rhythms, its pulse. She could feel it, the ancient power of the trees, the quiet hum of the earth. But now there was something more. There was the anger, the corruption that had seeped into its heart, and it was within her as well. She reached into herself, pulling at the raw energy of the forest. But this time, she focused on the source, the heart of the corruption. She could feel the creature's essence embedded in the forest's roots, tangled in the dark tendrils that now spread across the village. "I won't let you take this," Lily whispered, her voice steady but filled with determination. She extended her hands, her fingers glowing with a soft, radiant light as she reached for the darkness that was consuming everything. The creature laughed again, its laughter echoing through the streets like a mocking reminder of how small her efforts seemed. "You think you can stop it? You think you can fight the forest's will? You are nothing compared to it." Lily opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on the creature. The anger, the fear, and the power surged through her, coiling around her like the forest's vines binding her to its will. But this time it wasn't the darkness that guided her. It was the light, the balance, the strength of the forest when it was whole, when it was at peace. "I am the forest's keeper," Lily declared, her voice rising above the creature's mocking words. "And I will restore the balance." The energy of the forest gathered in her hands, swirling and pulsing, and with a single forceful push, she thrust it forward toward the creature. The power of the forest, pure, uncorrupted, crashed against the creature's dark essence, and for a moment everything froze. The air crackled with tension as the two forces collided, the light of the forest fighting against the darkness that had taken root in its heart. The creature's form flickered, its twisted features distorting under the pressure. It screeched in agony as the light began to consume it, dissolving the shadows that had held it together. "No." The creature howled, its voice filled with desperation. "You cannot destroy what I am." But Lily did not falter. She pushed harder, drawing from the core of the forest's energy, from the peace that it had once known. The darkness began to shatter, the corrupted vines that had spread through the village withering away, turning to dust. The creature screamed. One last time, its form dissolving into the air like smoke caught in a gust of wind. And then there was nothing but silence. Lily collapsed to her knees, the power that had surged through her fading away, leaving her exhausted. The village square was quiet now, the ground still, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. The forest once again stood calm at the edge of the village, its dark presence receding. Lily looked around at the villagers, some of whom had gathered once more, peering from behind the safety of their homes. They were frightened, confused, but they were alive. She had saved them. And the forest would heal. With her as its keeper, the balance would return. It would no longer be a place of darkness and fear. It would be a place of peace, of understanding, where its power could grow, not consume. Lily stood, wiping the dirt from her hands, and with one final glance at the village and the forest beyond, she turned and began to walk back into the woods, her steps steady, her heart full of purpose. The forest was alive, and it would thrive with her guiding it, with her protecting it. She was no longer afraid. Part 13. Lily walked back into the forest, her steps slower, now more deliberate. The village was behind her, quiet and still, but her mind was filled with the weight of what had just transpired. She had defeated the creature, quelled the darkness that had threatened to consume both the forest and the village, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The forest's heart had been corrupted, and while she had restored balance for now, the shadows still lingered, hidden beneath the roots, waiting for the next opportunity to rise. The trees seemed to part for her as she walked deeper into the woods, their twisted branches no longer oppressive but protective. The whispers that had once plagued her mind were gone, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds. The forest was healing, but the scars would remain, etched into its very soul. And into hers, she paused by an ancient oak, its gnarled roots sprawling out like the fingers of an old, forgotten god. It had been here long before she was born, and it would stand long after she was gone. She placed a hand on the rough bark, feeling the pulse of life within it, the heartbeat of the forest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was apologizing to. The forest? Herself? Perhaps both. She had learned so much in such a short time, but the most important lesson had come in the form of the creature, the twisted version of herself, a reflection of everything she had feared, everything she had run from. She had thought that by fighting the forest, by rejecting its power, she could escape its grasp. But now she understood. The forest wasn't something to fight. It was something to understand, to embrace, to protect. And so she would protect it. The balance would not be so easily broken again. Not on her watch dot as Lily stood in the quiet of the forest. The air around her seemed to thrum with energy, a steady pulse that called her deeper, pulling her toward the heart of the woods, to the place where the magic was most ancient, most potent. She had learned to feel it now, the living pulse of the forest, and she knew that this was where she truly belonged, not in the village, not among the people who could never understand what she had experienced. The village was a world of light, of safety, of routine. The forest was where she could be herself, where she could nurture the power that had once terrified her. With a deep breath, Lily made her way toward the heart of the forest. She knew there were dangers still ahead. There were always dangers when you dealt with ancient magic, with forces beyond human understanding, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the darkness and survived. She had found her place in the world. The forest seemed to grow quieter the further she walked, the shadows deepening, the trees closing in. She was nearing the ancient grove, the place where the magic was strongest, where the pulse of the earth beat in time with her own. As she neared the clearing, a strange sense of familiarity washed over her. It was as though she had been here before, as though this place had always been a part of her dot. In the center of the grove stood an enormous stone circle, ancient and weathered, covered in moss and vines. The symbols carved into the stones were faded, but they still hummed with power, an energy that felt like it had been waiting for her, waiting for this moment. She knew, without a doubt, that this was the heart of the forest. This was where the magic began. Lily stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the stones, and as her fingers brushed the surface of one, a surge of energy shot through her, a rush of power so intense it nearly knocked her off her feet. The forest's energy pulsed around her, wrapping itself around her like a cloak, filling her with a sense of purpose, of belonging. The stones around her began to glow, faint at first, then brighter, their ancient symbols coming to life. Energy that flowed through the stone was like nothing she had ever felt before. It was pure, untamed, ancient magic, the true essence of the forest. But there was something else in the energy. Something darker. Lily froze. The darkness had not gone. It had merely been dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike. She could feel it now, coiling beneath the surface, a deep, twisting malevolence that threatened to consume the power around her. The forest had not been healed completely. It was still infected, still vulnerable. Lily's breath caught in her throat as the air around her began to grow colder, the light from the stones dimming. The darkness was rising again. She could hear it now, the whispers, louder than before. But this time it was not the voice of the forest. It was something else, something older, something malevolent. Asterisk, Lily? Asterisk. The voice slithered into her mind, dark and twisted, and she could feel the cold grip of the creature, the real creature, the true darkness crawling back into her thoughts, trying to take control again. It was the forest, yes, but it was more than that. It was corrupted. It was broken. And the darkness wanted to consume everything. Lily clenched her fists, pulling the energy from the stones into herself, pushing the darkness back. No. The word came out with a force she didn't know she had, and as she spoke, the stones flared brighter, their light pushing back the shadows. But the darkness was not so easily defeated. The ground beneath her feet trembled as if the earth itself was fighting against her. The trees began to groan, their branches bending as if they were alive and struggling against the pull of the energy. Asterisk, you are mine. Lily, asterisk, the voice whispered, again slithering around her like a serpent. Asterisk, you cannot escape me. You are part of me. You are the forest. Asterisk. The forest shook violently, the once peaceful clearing now filled with a sense of impending doom. Lily could feel the power within her pushing against the darkness, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. The trees began to close. In on her, their twisted branches reaching toward her like claws, their bark blackened and rotting, corrupted by the same dark force. The ground cracked open again, and from the fissures, tendrils of shadow began to rise, wrapping themselves around her legs, pulling her into the earth. Lily gasped, struggling to break free, but she could feel the weight of the forest's corruption sinking deeper into her soul. She had to stop it. She had to stop it now. With a final desperate cry, Lily reached deep into herself, pulling from the very heart of the forest's magic. This time she did not fight the darkness. She embraced it. She had become the forest's keeper, but she had also become its healer. She was the balance, and now she would restore it with all her strength. Lily pushed the power outward, her hands outstretched toward the sky. The darkness screamed, but she held firm. The stones around her glowed brighter than ever, and the forest trembled as the corruption began to unravel. The shadows pushed back by the light of the pure forest magic that flowed through her dot, and then, for the first time in what felt like eternity, the forest was silent. Part 14. The silence that followed was unlike anything Lily had ever experienced. It was a deep, still silence that stretched across the forest, a profound stillness that filled the air like a thick blanket. The corrupted tendrils that had reached toward her slowly began to retract, the darkness retreating into the earth from which it had emerged. The trees, once bent under the weight of the evil force, now stood tall again, their leaves rustling in the wind like a sigh of relief. Lily remained standing in the center of the stone circle, her hands still raised, her body trembling with the force of the magic that had just poured through her. The energy from the forest swirled around her, a steady pulse that echoed the rhythm of her own heartbeat. For a moment, she wasn't sure whether she had succeeded, whether the darkness was truly gone. But then, she felt it. The weight that had pressed on her chest for so long, the weight of the forest's corrupted influence lifted. The light from the stones grew even brighter, shining in all directions, pushing away the last of the shadows. The ground beneath her seemed to hum with life, a deep, resonant thrum that filled her soul with peace. The forest was healing, its ancient power returned to balance, and she, Lily, was its guardian, its protector. The whispers that had once filled her mind with fear were now soft, gentle. The voices of the forest, not the creatures that had tried to consume her, but the ancient souls of the trees, the earth, the wind. They spoke to her now, not in darkness, but in harmony. She lowered her hands slowly, her fingers tingling with the aftershock of the magic. Her body ached from the strain of wielding so much power, but she couldn't help the sense of pride that welled up inside her. She had done it. She had saved the forest. She had embraced it, and now she had healed it. There was no going back, no undoing what had been done. But Lily knew she didn't need to. The forest had been waiting for her. It had been waiting for someone who could protect it, someone who could understand its true nature, not as a force to be feared, but as a force to be balanced. And now that balance was hers to maintain. But as the last of the darkness faded, Lily felt a pang of something else, a sense of unease that had crept into her heart. The forest was healing, but was the world ready for it? For the power that she now wielded? The people of the village, the ones who had always lived under the shadow of the forest, wouldn't understand. How could they? How could they accept that the forest, the dark, dangerous place they had always feared, was now alive with a new energy? How could they accept her now that she was something more than human? She glanced back at the village, which seemed so far away now. The homes were distant dots in the landscape, the village square a smudge in the horizon. She could feel the presence of the villagers somewhere back there, wondering what had happened, what she had done. She had saved them. She had saved the forest. But what would they think of her now? Lily, the voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it cut through the silence of the grove like a sharp blade. She turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat. The voice, it wasn't the dark creature. It wasn't the forest calling. It was something else. Someone else. She blinked in surprise as Marjorie stepped into the clearing, her face pale with worry, her eyes wide as they locked onto Lily. She had followed her into the forest after all. The fear and concern that had filled her voice earlier was now replaced by an expression of awe, a quiet wonder. "Lily, I don't know what happened," Marjorie said softly, her voice trembling. "I heard the cry, and the ground shook. I thought the village was being torn apart. But then everything stopped. It's like it's all gone." Lily didn't know how to explain it, how to make sense of the transformation that had just occurred. She had been through so much, and now, standing before Marjorie, she couldn't find the words. The power inside her, the forest's power, was too much to explain in simple terms. "It's over," Lily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The forest, the darkness. It's been cleansed. It's at peace now." Marjorie took a step closer, her gaze scanning the grove, the ancient stones glowing softly, the trees towering in the distance. She hesitated, as though unsure whether to step forward or retreat. But in her eyes there was a mix of awe and confusion, and perhaps a little fear. "You did this?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Lily nodded slowly. She didn't want to explain, didn't want to drag Marjorie deeper into this world, this new reality that had become her own. Marjorie couldn't understand. No one could. Not yet. "I'm part of the forest now," Lily said, her voice soft. "But certain. I protect it. I guide it." Marjorie took another step forward, her hand outstretched, as if trying to reach Lily, trying to understand what she had become. "And what about us? What about the village? Are we ... Are we safe now?" Lily met her friend's gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "You're safe. The village is safe. But things are different now. The forest, the power it holds, it's not something anyone can ignore anymore." Marjorie looked down at the ground, her thoughts clearly racing. "But you're not the same. You've changed, Lily." Lily smiled faintly, but the smile was bittersweet. "I had to change. I couldn't stay who I was before. But that doesn't mean I'm lost. I'm still me. I'm still Lily." A long silence stretched between them as Marjorie processed the weight of Lily's words, the weight of everything that had happened. "I don't know if the village will ever understand," Marjorie said, her voice quiet, hesitant. "But I believe you, and I believe you can protect the forest. You are ... a part of it." Lily didn't reply. There was no need. The truth was clear now. She was part of the forest. She was its guardian, its keeper. And as long as she lived, she would ensure that it would never again fall to corruption. "I'm going to stay here," Lily said finally, her gaze drifting toward the heart of the forest, where the trees swayed gently in the breeze. "This is where I belong now. This is where I'm needed." Marjorie nodded, her expression filled with a quiet understanding, even if there was still so much she didn't fully comprehend. "I'll visit you. I'll bring the others. They'll want to know you're all right." Lily smiled softly, feeling the warmth of her friend's support. "Thank you. But don't worry. The forest will guide me. I'll be all right." And with that, Marjorie turned and made her way back toward the village, leaving Lily alone in the clearing. Lily watched her friend disappear into the distance, and for the first time she didn't feel the weight of loneliness. She didn't need anyone else to understand. She was the forest's keeper, and she was no longer afraid. The trees around her whispered a welcome, the wind carrying their ancient songs. The forest was alive, and it was at peace. And so was Lily. Part 15. Lily stood alone in the heart of the forest, her hands resting gently on the rough bark of an ancient tree. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, casting soft beams of light on the forest floor, illuminating the intricate web of roots and delicate ferns. The power of the forest flowed through her, a constant hum beneath her skin. She could feel the pulse of every leaf, the quiet rustle of every branch, the deep, steady heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet. The corruption that had once poisoned. The forest was gone, but there was still work to be done. Healing was never a simple process. It was ongoing, a delicate balance of nurturing what had been broken while allowing it to grow again. The forest had already begun to regain its strength, but it was a fragile thing. It would need her to protect it, to guide it, as she had done before. The village was safe, the immediate threat was over, but the journey ahead was just beginning. Her mind drifted back to the moment when she had confronted darkness, the creature that had once mirrored her, the manifestation of her fears, her doubts. It had been a battle of wills, but in the end, Lily had realized the truth. The darkness was not just a force outside of her. It was a part of her, a part of everything, a part of the forest. And to defeat it, she had to understand it, accept it, and ultimately heal it. Lily's breath was steady as she closed her eyes, feeling the energy of the forest around her, the wind stirring the leaves in a gentle dance. She had made her choice. She had embraced the forest, embraced its power. She was no longer a child running from the unknown. She was a keeper now, not just of the forest, but of herself. But as she stood there, feeling the forest's rhythm beneath her feet, she knew that her connection with it was not without sacrifice. She had been changed by the forest, reshaped by the magic that coursed through her veins. She was no longer entirely human, and while that gave her strength, it also made her feel something new, a deep, abiding loneliness. Her thoughts drifted back to Marjorie. The village had been left behind, its familiar faces fading into the distance as Lily stepped into a new life. But there was a part of her that longed for the simplicity of her old life, the world where things were clear, where people weren't bound by the ancient power of the forest. But that world was no longer hers. She had become something more. She had become a bridge between the natural world and the human world, a keeper of the balance. And while she had accepted her new role, the isolation was something she still had to come to terms with. A soft rustle of leaves interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to find a figure standing in the clearing. It was not Marjorie, not a villager. It was someone else, a figure cloaked in shadow, standing just beyond the circle of light cast by the trees. For a moment, Lily hesitated, sensing the disturbance in the air. This was no ordinary visitor. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face hidden beneath a cloak, their features obscured by the shadow of their hood. But Lily could feel their presence, a quiet power that pulsed in the air, resonating with the forest's magic. "You are." "The keeper," the figure said, their voice smooth, calm, yet carrying an undercurrent of something ancient. "The forest has chosen you." Lily didn't move. She stood tall, her posture steady, her heart beating in rhythm with the trees. "And who are you?" she asked, her voice firm but calm. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if considering her question. "I am a traveler," they said softly, "a seeker of ancient power like you." Lily's eyes narrowed. "I don't know you. What is it that you seek in the forest?" The figure stepped closer, their eyes glinting from beneath the hood. And Lily caught a glimpse of something familiar, a flicker of darkness that seemed to dance just beneath the surface. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. "I seek understanding." the figure replied. The forest is a place of great power. It has always been, but you have taken on a role far greater than that of a mere guardian. You are the keeper of its secrets, the one who controls its heart. Lily took a deep breath, her hands clenched at her sides. I protect the balance, she said firmly. That is all. The figure seemed to smile, though the expression was hidden beneath the hood. You think it is as simple as that? The forest's power is not just for you to protect. It is for you to wield. And if you truly understand the balance, then you must also understand the price. Lily stiffened. What do you mean by that? The figure stepped even closer, their presence now filling the air with an unsettling energy. The forest is not as peaceful as it seems, not as pure. It is ancient, yes, but it is also wild, untamed. And the more you try to control it, the more you will find that the forest's true nature is unpredictable. Lily's breath caught in her throat, her pulse quickening. Are you threatening me? The figure did not answer right away. Instead, they reached out as if sensing her uncertainty. Their fingers brushed lightly against her arm, sending a shiver through her body. You are not yet ready to understand, they said quietly, but you will be. The forest is calling you, Lily. It wants more. It needs someone to guide it through the storm that is coming. Lily stepped back, shaking off the figure's touch. What storm? The figure's eyes glinted with something dangerous, something that sent a ripple of fear through Lily. The forest has always been a reflection of the world. The balance has been broken, yes, but that is only the beginning. There are greater forces at play now, forces that you have yet to confront. Lily's heart skipped a beat as the figure stepped back, their form dissolving into the shadows like smoke in the wind. Remember, the figure's voice echoed in the clearing, the forest may be yours to protect, but it is also yours to embrace. And then, just like that, the figure was gone. Lily stood there, alone once again, her thoughts swirling. The air around her was still, the forest calm, but the unsettling presence of the traveler lingered in her mind. What did they mean by forces? What storm was coming? She had fought to protect the forest. She had become its keeper, its guardian. But she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. Something darker was coming, something beyond her control. And whether she was ready or not, she would have to face it. The forest's heart beat beneath her, steady and powerful. But now, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something darker, something far more dangerous, was waiting. And it was waiting for her. Part 16. The forest had always been a place of mystery, a place where nature reigned in ways both beautiful and terrifying. But now, Lily felt a shift, a deeper sense of unease that seemed to permeate the very air she breathed. She had heard. The figure's words felt the weight of their warning, and yet there was something about them that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The forest, for all its beauty, was hiding something darker, something she had yet to confront. The air had grown thicker, the forest itself more oppressive, as if it had sensed the disturbance, the ripple that had been caused by the figure's presence. The whispers that had once been a comforting hum now seemed to murmur in ominous tones, as though the trees themselves were aware of the coming storm. She could feel the tension in the air, a current of energy that crackled just below the surface. Lily didn't know where to begin. She had healed the forest, restored balance, but there were things beyond her understanding, things beyond even her control. The forest had its secrets, and those secrets were beginning to surface, one by one. The figure had been right in one regard. The forest was not as peaceful as it seemed. It was wild, untamed, and it had a life of its own. Taking a deep breath, Lily began to walk once more, her footsteps slow and deliberate, as if each step carried with it the weight of the forest's ancient power. She could feel the ground beneath her feet, the roots that twisted and knotted beneath the earth, the heart of the forest beating in time with her own. It was calling to her, just as it had when she first arrived. But now it felt different. More urgent dot, she approached the clearing where the stone circle had once stood, where the last battle had been fought. The stones were no longer glowing, no longer pulsing with power. They had returned to their quiet, weathered state, just like the rest of the forest. But as Lily stood before them, a strange sensation washed over her, a feeling that something was missing. A part of the forest had been left behind, something essential, and she could feel its absence in her bones. Her mind turned back to the figure, the mysterious traveler who had spoken in riddles and half-truths. They had said that the forest had a greater purpose, that the storm was coming, but they hadn't explained what that storm was. What forces was the figure speaking of? What did the forest need from her that she hadn't already given? The answers eluded her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Something was shifting in the very fabric of the forest. The roots of the trees were growing restless. The wind had grown colder, and the shadows seemed longer than they had ever been before. Lily reached out toward the stone circle, her hand resting lightly on the edge of one of the ancient stones. She could feel the pulse of magic beneath her fingertips, faint but undeniable. The forest was not yet whole. There was still something it needed. But what? The ground rumbled beneath her feet, and she froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The tremor grew stronger, and the air seemed to thicken with a palpable sense of dread. The forest was reacting, but this wasn't the peaceful hum of its usual energy. This was something else, a warning, a call. The trees around her began to sway, their branches groaning as if they were in pain. The whispering had returned, but this time it was louder, more insistent. The earth beneath her feet cracked open, and from the cracks, a dark, pulsing energy began to emerge. It was the same darkness that had once taken root in the forest, the same malevolent force that Lily had fought to banish. But it wasn't gone. Not truly. Lily stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. "No," she whispered to herself. "This can't be happening." The dark energy swirled around her, rising from the cracks in the earth, a vortex of shadow and smoke. It began to take shape, coalescing into something more solid, more tangible. The ground trembled again, and the figure from before the traveler materialized from the shadows, stepping forward with a calm, unsettling grace. "I warned you," the figure said, their voice like a whisper in the wind. "You cannot control it. You cannot fix the forest. It was never meant to be fixed." Lily felt a chill run through her as she took a step back. "What do you want from me?" she demanded. "What is this? What is happening?" The figure tilted its head as if studying her, then smiled. But it wasn't a smile of comfort. It was a smile of understanding, of something far darker. The forest has always been a reflection of the world, of humanity. You think you've restored balance, but you've only delayed what is to come. The storm ... The storm I spoke of, it is not just the storm of the forest. It is the storm of all things. The forest is connected to everything. The balance you've restored, it was never permanent. Lily's heart pounded as the figure took another step toward her, its shadow stretching across the clearing. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky, filled with disbelief. "The forest's heart," the figure continued, "is the heart of the world. The darkness you fought is only a reflection of the chaos that brews in the world outside. You can feel it, can't you? The world has been teetering on the edge, waiting for the wrong push. And now that the forest is waking again, now that its true power is rising, the storm has already begun." The wind howled, carrying with it the sound of distant thunder, as if the world itself was preparing for something catastrophic. Lily stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. She had felt something in the air, something beyond the forest. She had known the balance was fragile, but she hadn't understood the true scope of the storm. The forest's awakening wasn't just about the forest. It was about the world itself, about the balance of everything. "What can I do?" Lily asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The figure's smile deepened. "You must choose, Lily. You must choose whether to fight for the balance or to embrace what is to come. The forest will not wait. Neither will the storm." The wind picked up again, swirling around her, carrying the scent of rain, of something far more ominous. The shadow of the figure grew darker, more consuming, until Lily couldn't see anything but the emptiness surrounding her dot. She had a choice. She had always had a choice, but now, standing in the heart of the forest, with the world hanging on the edge of chaos, she wasn't sure what the right choice was. Could she truly control the storm, or was it too late? Lily took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the forest beneath her feet, the energy of the earth coursing through her veins. She could feel the weight of everything on her shoulders, the world's fate intertwined with her own. The storm was coming, and she would face it, asterisk whatever it took. Part 17. The storm that the figure had spoken of wasn't just a simple weather front or a distant rumble in the sky. No, it was far more dangerous, more insidious. It was a force, an ancient force that had been building long before Lily had even set foot in the forest. The storm was not just something the earth would endure. It was something the world would be forced to reckon with. A storm born from the very fabric of existence. Lily stood at the center of the clearing, her feet firmly planted, the wind howling around her. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her breathing steady, forcing her mind to focus. She had learned to face the darkness, to embrace the balance. But now, with the storm on the horizon, she realized the true magnitude of what she was facing. It wasn't just the forest that needed saving. It was the entire world. The figure stood before her, their presence still as cold and dispassionate as before. "You feel it now, don't you?" The figure's voice whispered, low and foreboding. "The pull of the storm? It is inevitable. Lily, the balance has been shattered, and now the storm will come for all that you hold dear." Lily didn't speak immediately. She could feel the energy in the air, vibrating with a power that was both terrifying and alluring. The storm was not just a literal force. It was a representation of chaos itself, the unchecked power of nature, of the forest, of everything that was left unresolved, threatening to overtake the world in an unstoppable wave. I'm not afraid. Of you, Lily finally said, her voice steady, though she could feel the storm tugging at her, trying to drown her resolve. You can't control me. Not anymore. The figure smirked, but there was something unsettling about the expression, something predatory in their eyes. You think you control the forest? You think you can stand in its way? You're merely a vessel, a temporary keeper. The forest is bigger than you, bigger than any one person. It will never be tamed, and neither will the storm. Lily's mind raced, but she didn't let her fear take root. The storm was a reflection of everything. She had battled the darkness, the chaos that had existed in the forest and in herself. She had fought the creature that had tried to control her, and now she had to face the storm, this final test that would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everything she had fought to protect. Perhaps, she said slowly, meeting the figure's gaze with a calm intensity. But the storm doesn't need to destroy. It can be redirected. It can be guided. The figure's smirk faltered for a brief moment, their eyes narrowing in disbelief. Redirected? You truly think you can control the storm? You're a fool if you believe that. The storm is too great, too powerful. The forest's heart has been disturbed, and now it will devour everything in its path. Lily closed her eyes, drawing from the energy within her, from the forest that had once been chaotic and dark, but that she had learned to understand, to protect. She had the power of the forest within her veins, but more than that, she had the will to guide it, to use it not as a weapon of destruction, but as a force of healing. The wind howled, but Lily ignored it, focusing only on the rhythm of the earth, the pulse of the trees. She could feel it, the energy of the storm building, but she could also feel its weakness. The storm was being guided by the wrong forces. It was being led by chaos, by imbalance, and Lily was going to change that. Her hands lifted, palms open, to the sky. She could feel the forest's energy swirling around her, connecting her to the roots beneath her feet, to the ancient power that pulsed through the land. The wind stilled for a moment, and in that stillness she found her focus. The storm's energy, raw and uncontrolled, was now in her hands. She wasn't going to fight it. She wasn't going to destroy it. She was going to guide it. A deep, resonating hum filled the clearing as Lily called the energy toward her. The forest responded, the trees bending in a subtle, synchronized dance. She could feel the storm's chaotic energy, but instead of allowing it to consume her, she channeled it. The storm was nothing more than energy, raw and untamed. But like all energy, it could be shaped. The figure stepped back, their eyes widening in disbelief. You you think you can do it? You can't control it, Lily. You're not strong enough. But Lily's voice was calm. It's not about strength. It's about understanding. With a final, forceful gesture, Lily pulled the storm's energy toward her heart, channeling it into the earth. She could feel the surge of power as it rushed through her, as the storm, wild and furious, was guided by her will. The wind picked up again, but this time it was no longer chaotic. It was focused. The rain began to fall, but it wasn't a torrential downpour. It was controlled, gentle, a reflection of the power that now flowed through her dot. The figure watched in stunned silence as the storm began to calm, the winds shifting, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. The darkness that had threatened to engulf the forest, the village, and the world receded like a bad memory. leaving behind a stillness that was almost sacred. Lily lowered her hands, the storm now at rest, the earth beneath her calm and steady. The energy that had once been chaotic now hummed with purpose, no longer threatening, no longer destructive. She turned back to the figure, her gaze unwavering. "You were right about one thing," she said softly. "I'm not strong enough to fight the storm, but I am strong enough to understand it." The figure stood there, speechless, as if unable to comprehend what had just happened. The storm had been tamed, the balance had been restored, but there was no victory in the figure's eyes, only the understanding that they had underestimated her. They had underestimated the forest, the power that she now carried within her. Lily took a deep breath, the last of the storm's energy fading into the earth, settling into the roots of the trees. The forest doesn't need to be controlled. It needs to be understood. It needs a keeper, a guardian. The figure took a step back, and for the first time, Lily saw something resembling respect in their eyes, perhaps even fear. "You are more than I thought," they said quietly, their voice tinged with awe and defeat. "But remember, Lily, there will always be storms. There will always be darkness." Lily nodded. "Yes, but the storm is only as strong as the chaos we let it feed on, and I will never let the darkness take hold again." With that, the figure dissolved into the shadows, disappearing without a trace. The storm was gone, the forest was at peace, and the balance had been restored. Lily stood alone in the clearing, but this time she didn't feel the weight of isolation. She felt the connection to the forest, to the earth, to everything that had come before, and everything that would come after. She had found her place, and she was ready for whatever came next. Part 18. The forest was still. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was peace. The storm that had threatened everything, the world, the village, the forest itself had been calmed, and the dark force that had once twisted, its heart had been expelled. Lily stood at the center of the ancient clearing, her body still buzzing with the energy of the forest, now at rest. She could feel its pulse beneath her feet, steady and strong, but it was different, lighter. She took a deep breath, the cool, fresh air filling her lungs. The rain had stopped, and the clouds that had once churned in anger above were now drifting away, leaving only the soft, golden light of the setting sun streaming through the canopy. The trees seemed to stretch toward the sky in gratitude, their leaves shimmering with newfound life. It was as though the world itself had been given a second chance, but Lily knew it wasn't over. The storm had been driven back, but there would always be more forces, more challenges. The balance would always be fragile, and it would be her responsibility to maintain it. She was the keeper, now the guardian of the forest, its protector. Yet there was still something deep within her that felt unsettled. The storm had been quelled, but the figure the traveler had left her with words she couldn't ignore. There will always be storms, and in the quiet, the words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, what did they mean by that? Asterisk, Lily closed her eyes and reached out with her senses, tapping into the energy of the forest once more. She could feel it, the pulse of life, the rhythm of the trees, the song of the earth. But this time there was something different, something beneath it. She couldn't quite place it, but it felt like a whisper just out of reach, a shadow at the edge of her perception. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Lily turned to find Marjorie walking toward her, a look of cautious curiosity on her face. The wind ruffled her hair as she approached, and for a moment it seemed as though the world had come back into focus. Lily hadn't realized how much she had missed the familiar presence of her friend. "Lily," Marjorie said softly, as if unsure whether to break the silence or not. Her eyes darted to the clearing around them, to the trees that now stood calm, no longer threatening. "Is it over? Is it really over?" Lily nodded slowly, her gaze lingering on the forest. "For now, the storm is gone. The balance has been restored. But there's always more to protect, always more to be done." Marjorie looked at her, studying her face, the change in Lily that had been so apparent since she returned to the forest. "You've changed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can see it. You're not the same as you were before. You're different, stronger." Lily turned to face her friend, her eyes searching for the words to explain what had happened, what she had become. "I had to change. I couldn't stay who I was before. But I'm still me, Marjorie. I'm still Lily. I've just learned more about who I really am, about the forest, about what I'm meant to protect." Marjorie took another step closer, her eyes filled with concern. "But what about the village? What about us? What about the people who don't understand this ... this power you have? You're not just Lily anymore. You're something else, something connected to the forest. What happens when people start asking questions?" Lily sighed, her breath catching in her throat as she turned back to the trees. "I don't know. I don't know if the village will ever understand. And maybe they don't need to. The forest chose me, and it's not something I can ignore. But I'm still Lily. I'm just a part of something bigger now." "But what about us?" Marjorie asked again, her voice filled with a desperation Lily had not expected. "What happens to the rest of us when we're left behind in a world that doesn't understand what you've become? Are we just forgotten?" Lily's heart ached at the question, at the raw emotion in Marjorie's voice. She had always been her friend, her anchor in the human world, but now there was distance between them, a distance that was growing harder to cross. "You're not forgotten," Lily said softly, her voice firm. "But I can't be what you want me to be anymore. I can't stay here in the village pretending that everything is the same. I can't be who I was. The forest is my responsibility. Now." Marjorie stood still, her face a mix of sadness and understanding. "I don't know if I can accept that. I don't know if I can accept you leaving, the you I used to know." Lily reached out and placed a hand, gently, on Marjorie's arm. "I'm not leaving you behind. You'll always be a part of me. But I can't ignore this anymore. I can't walk away from what I am." A long silence passed between them as the wind began to pick up again, the trees swaying gently. Marjorie stepped back, her gaze distant, her expression conflicted. "I don't know what to do with all of this, but ... I understand. I just wish ... I wish it didn't have to be like this." Lily nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the choices she had made. "I wish it didn't too, but the storm is not over. The forest needs me." Marjorie didn't respond immediately. She simply turned and began to walk back toward the village, leaving Lily standing alone in the clearing, feeling the weight of the decision she had made. The forest was at peace for now, but the storm was still coming. There was more to this journey, more to the balance, more to protect. And Lily wasn't sure how much longer she could keep everything at bay. The darkness, the forces that had once threatened to consume her were still out there. She could feel them lurking in the corners of her mind, waiting for their chance to return. But as she stood there, in the center of the forest, she felt the heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet. The forest had chosen her, and she had accepted it. She was its keeper. She was its protector. And she would face whatever storm came next. The shadows of the forest had not yet vanished, but Lily knew now, without a doubt, that she was ready to face them, and this time she would not back down. Part 19. The evening sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The village lay in the distance, a small collection of homes, oblivious to the larger forces at play. Lily stood at the edge of the trees, her back to the village, her heart heavy with the weight of the choice she had made. She was no longer just a girl from the village, no longer just someone who could live a simple life. She had accepted the forest, and the forest had accepted her in return. But this choice came with consequences. There was no going back. The wind whispered through the branches above her, the familiar hum of the forest settling over her like a blanket. The power of the trees, of the earth, still pulsed beneath her feet, deep and ancient. But she could feel a growing unease, a subtle shift in the air that made her skin prickle with tension. It wasn't just the storm she had faced. There was something else, something deeper, something that had awakened when the darkness had been banished. She reached out and touched the rough bark of a nearby tree, feeling its pulse, its heartbeat, but it wasn't enough. The wind was picking up again, the shadows stretching longer, darker. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was coming. Something worse. She turned and walked deeper into the forest, her steps deliberate, her mind focused. She had to find answers. The figure, the traveler, had warned her of something, but it hadn't been clear. The storm was not over. It was merely the beginning. But what did that mean? The trees closed around her, their gnarled branches reaching toward the sky, twisting like ancient fingers. The path became less defined, the underbrush thicker, the air heavier. Lily's senses sharpened as she moved forward, her connection to the forest growing stronger. It was as though the forest itself was guiding her, urging her to go deeper, to confront whatever it was that lay ahead. Then, as she entered a small clearing, she saw it dot. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stone structure, ruined, ancient, covered in moss and vines. It was unlike anything she had seen before. The stones were carved with symbols she didn't recognize, symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie light. They were older than anything in the forest, older than the trees themselves. Lily stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch the surface of one of the stones. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through her, sharp and powerful. The force of it knocked her back, sending her sprawling to the ground. The air around her crackled with an unnatural energy, and the trees in the distance began to sway violently, their branches creaking as though they were in pain. "What is this?" Lily whispered, struggling to her feet, her heart racing. The stone structure pulsed with power, its ancient magic thrumming in the air. It felt ... wrong. It was as though this place was not a part of the forest, but something older, something far more dangerous. The forest had never felt this way before. This place was a relic of something that had been buried, something that had been forgotten. The wind picked up, howling through the clearing, and Lily's senses flared. She could hear it now, the sound of something moving in the distance, something that was approaching. It was too late to turn back now. The storm was not just the forest's darkness, it was something far more sinister. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and from the shadows of the trees, a figure emerged. A figure cloaked in black, their face hidden beneath the hood. They were tall, their presence imposing, their energy crackling with dark power. As they stepped forward, the air grew colder, the light of the setting sun swallowed by the darkness they brought with them. "You've found it," the figure said, their voice low and cold, like ice scraping against stone. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the voice. It was the same voice that had whispered to her in the clearing, the same voice that had warned her of the storm. The figure was no stranger, it was the traveler. "You?" Lily began, her voice shaking with anger. "What is this place? What do you want?" The traveler tilted their heads slightly, their movements slow and deliberate. "This is the heart of the forest's power," they said, their voice dark and foreboding. "This is where it all began, the place where the forest's magic was first born." Lily shook her head, trying to understand. "But the forest, it's alive. It's a force for balance. It's been healed." The traveler's lips curled into Kide. A thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You've healed the surface, but you don't understand the depth of the forest's power. The balance you speak of is fragile. The storm you faced was only a taste of what's to come. The forest was never truly healed. It was only waiting." Lily stepped back, her heart pounding. "Waiting? For what?" The traveler's smile deepened, and they raised their arms toward the sky, for the true storm to arrive. The forest was always meant to be a force of chaos, a reflection of the world's deeper struggles. It cannot be tamed. It cannot be healed, because it is chaos incarnate. And now it is time for the true power of the forest to awaken. As they spoke, the clearing around Lily seemed to darken further, the air thickening with a suffocating energy. The trees bent as if in submission, their leaves turning black at the edges, withering in the presence of the traveler's dark power. The stone structure began to hum, its symbols glowing with an eerie light. Lily's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The forest was being corrupted again. The traveler, the one who had warned her, was not trying to help. They were trying to bring forth the true storm, the true darkness that had once consumed the forest. "No," Lily whispered, her voice filled with resolve. "I won't let you." The traveler's laughter filled the air, dark and twisted, echoing through the trees. "You cannot stop it, Lily. The forest is too strong. You are too weak. The chaos will consume everything." Lily's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. "You're wrong. The forest doesn't have to be consumed by chaos. It doesn't have to destroy everything." With that, she raised her hands, the power of the forest surging through her. She could feel it now, the energy of the trees, the earth, the roots. The forest wasn't chaos, it was balance, and she would protect it. The traveler's expression darkened. "You don't understand. You cannot protect what you do not control." But Lily was already moving, her arms outstretched as the forest's power coursed through her. The storm was here, but this time It would be her storm. Part 20. Lily stood at the heart of the forest, the dark traveler before her, the ominous stone structure pulsing with malevolent energy. The storm, a powerful force of chaos, churned in the air, ready to consume everything in its path. But Lily refused to let it take hold again. She had seen the forest's true power and its dangers, and now, standing at the precipice of destruction, she knew what had to be done. The traveler, their dark figure cloaked in shadow, watched her with a cold, knowing smile. You cannot fight this, Lily. You cannot control what was never meant to be controlled. The forest's true nature is chaos. It is destruction. It cannot be tamed. It was meant to consume. Lily took a deep breath, her hands steady as they hovered just above the ground. The air crackled with raw energy, the force of the storm building around them. The traveler's words rattled in her mind, but she refused to give in to their despair. The forest could be protected. The chaos it harbored didn't have to destroy everything. It could be guided, channeled. She had done it before. She could do it again. I won't let you bring chaos to the world, she said firmly, her voice unwavering. The forest doesn't have to be your weapon. It can be a force of life, of balance, and I will protect it. The traveler's expression twisted with amusement, though there was a dark flicker of something more in their eyes. You think you can change it, but you're just a piece in a much larger game. The forest cannot be saved by your hope. It will break, and when it does, it will break you. Lily stepped forward, her feet light, her heart filled with purpose. She could feel the forest's energy beneath her, the deep pulse of life flowing through the roots and branches, waiting for her to guide it. But this time she wouldn't fight the storm with raw power. She would face it with understanding. The storm raged around her, wind howling, trees groaning, the energy of the corrupted forest pressing down on her. But she could feel it, the balance. There was power in the storm, in the chaos, but there was also strength in the calm that lay beneath it. She extended her arms, palms open to the sky, the energy of the forest rising to meet her. The ground beneath her feet shuddered with the force of the traveler's dark influence. But Lily focused, pulling from the ancient magic of the trees, from the pulse of the earth itself. You cannot control the forest, the traveler repeated, voice full of malice. It is too powerful, too wild. Lily's eyes flickered with determination. I'm not trying to control it. I'm guiding it. I am part of the forest, and the forest is part of me. The words felt like a mantra, a truth that ran deep in her soul. The energy of the forest, the very essence of life that had been corrupted, surged around her. It wasn't chaos, not really. It was potential, and it was her job to protect it, to ensure it didn't consume the world. As her hands moved, the storm began to shift. The wind, once furious and uncontrolled, began to calm. The trees that had been bending under the storm's pressure straightened, their branches no longer bent in fear. The ground, once shaking with anger, found its stability again. The corruption that had spread through the forest began to recede, like the ebb of a tide pulling away from the shore. The traveler, their form flickering in the shifting energy, seemed to realize what was happening. They took a step forward, their face twisting into a snarl. You can't do this, Lily. You cannot fight the nature of the forest. It will consume you. But Lily didn't listen to their words. The power of the forest surged through her, guiding her movements. She didn't need to fight the traveler. She didn't need to resist their darkness. She simply needed to show the forest that its power didn't have to consume everything. It could coexist. It could protect. The stones around her glowed, their ancient symbols flickering with energy. The energy in the forest was not a curse. It was a gift if only it could be understood. And now she was the one who understood it. She was the keeper. She had always been the keeper dot with a final forceful push. Lily channeled the energy of the forest toward the heart of the storm. The dark figure in front of her screamed as the power exploded around them, the darkness consumed by the light of the forest's true magic. The figure's form flickered violently, their body writhing in the swirling energy. But it wasn't enough to stop the flood of light that surged through the clearing. For a moment, everything went still. The storm ceased. The wind stopped. The world paused, holding its breath. Then, as the light faded, the forest around her stood calm. The trees were once again alive, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The air was no longer heavy with chaos. It was filled with the quiet hum of life. The traveler was gone, their dark form dissipating into the shadows like smoke in the wind. Lily stood in the center of the clearing, her chest heaving, the energy from the storm still humming in her veins. The forest was at peace, but she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The forest's power, its chaos, was part of her now. She had learned to harness it, to guide it. She had faced the darkness within herself and within the forest, and now she had to ensure that balance was maintained. She would be the guardian of the forest, the keeper of its peace. She would never let the darkness consume it again. But there was one more thing Lily realized as she stood there. The stillness of the clearing surrounding her dot. The storm hadn't just been external. It hadn't been just a force of nature. It had been a test. The forest had wanted to know if she was truly ready, if she could stand firm, not only against the chaos of the world, but against her own doubts. She was ready now. And the forest, alive and untamed, was hers to protect Dot as the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. Lily turned toward the path that would lead her back into the heart of the forest. She had a role to play. She had a world to protect. As she walked, the forest seemed to whisper around her, welcoming her home.